Do you love to play Magic Online but have a tight budget? Check out Mtgo Academy's Academy Budget Bot in the Magic Online Classifieds. All cards in stock are cheaper than one event ticket.
Alright, hello everyone. Here we are for round 2 of the Vintage Daily event. Let's see what our opening hand is. We did win the die roll, which is nice. So our opening hand is okay as long as we can land the Sol Ring. So we can go turn 1 Mishra's Factory, play Sol Ring, play Chalice on 0, and then potentially play Chalice on 1. Not the worst. And then turn 2 we could play Lodestone Golem. Alternatively, we could also play Lodestone Golem on turn 1 instead of the Chalice's plan. So this is a keepable hand as long as things go our way. Unfortunately, they don't. Sol Ring gets met by a mental misstep and the plan has to change a little bit. So at this point I change gears, switch over to playing Chalice on 0 and hoping that that gets the job done. Actually, sorry, play Chalice on 0 and then Chalice on 1, since that's what our mana allows us. Unfortunately, the Lodestone Golem plan is going to have to be put on ice until we can draw another land. So the hope was at least the Chalices can stop them from doing something. So our opponent ends up playing turn 1 Library of Alexandria, which is a little bit of a problem because they can potentially draw out of the problems here, namely through drawing lands. And we ended up drawing Mox Ruby, which is exactly what we didn't really need, because Chalice at 0 is preventing us from playing it, so we really have no option to do anything that turn. Our opponent plays the Misty Rainforest. We draw another Lodestone Golem. No land, so unfortunately we are still kind of behind. Our opponent plays another land and is drawing cards off of Library of Alexandria, so luckily for us, we finally did draw a land, and Cavern of Souls was a pretty good one, because at this point they are representing mana drain mana, and if nothing else they might have a force in their hand because they have been drawing cards. So Cavern of Souls naming Golem lets us play Lodestone Golem through a counter spell. So it was a good start there, at least top deck for Cavern of Souls. So our opponent plays an island, fetches out another land, and continues to draw cards off of Library. We draw an Ancient Tomb for a turn, which is really nice. That allows us to play either Lodestone or Kuldotha Forgemaster. I believe we play the Lodestone because it's better to have another lock piece, and the next turn we can then go out and play Phyrexian Metamorph. So our opponent played a Tropical Island, drew another card off the Library of Alexandria, and played a Time Vault. So at this point, we are in sort of a weird situation where the Time Vault is kind of a threat. Although we have him locked up with a Chalice of the Void on 1, he could just simply bounce that spell. There are people that are playing main decks Steel Sabotage, so there's a potential that he could just bounce it, play the Voltaic Key, and just combo out for the win. He could also tinker into a Voltaic Key, or he could just play Tezzeret at this point. So although the Time Vault doesn't look threatening on the surface, it is actually quite threatening. And this being turn 5, he's drawn 4 extra cards off of Library at this point, so his hands has to be pretty stacked. Although we are close to winning with Lodestone Golem, he is like a Sol Ring and a Tezzeret away from just winning the game. So it's a little bit of a concern for us until we drew the Tango Wire. The Tango Wire will lock the game up, but there was a brief period of time where I was a little concerned about the Time Vault. So we attack with both the Lodestone Golems and play the Tango Wire. Tango Wire gets met with a Force of Will, so we just ended up deciding to play a third Lodestone And I think that is effectively ends the game. Yep, so that was enough. 3 lodestone golems was enough for the win. So we are on to game 2. Okay, our opening hand for game 2 is pretty interesting. We got a couple of 3 lands: Mishra's Workshop, Tomb, and Wasteland, which will come in handy potentially. And we also have a Black Lotus. So there's the opportunity for us to play Wasteland, Lotus, and Metalworker on turn 1. Alternatively, we could also play Ancient Tomb, Black Lotus, and Forge Master on turn 1. So we have some options, but I think the preferable plan is to try and control their mana. It looks like they're playing sort of a, maybe a Tezzeret type of a deck, or maybe an Oath deck or something along those lines at this point. So there's a possibility that we want to try and control their mana production, and Wasteland does that better than just playing a good Oath of Forge Master on turn 1. Maybe that's the wrong way to play this deck. I'm not 100% familiar with it, but that's kind of the way I look at this hand, and figure that's sort of the best plan for the deck. Because even if we get Forge Master out on turn 1, there's no artifacts to sacrifice, right? Because we have to use the Lotus to get it out on turn 1. Turn 2, we just play Metalworker. We still need a 3rd artifact just to be able to search this up, and that doesn't seem like the play that we want to do. So the opponent leads off with just an Underground Sea, which makes things a little bit easier for us. If they let out with a fetch land, maybe that changes our plan a little bit, but with them playing an Underground Sea, it makes the Wasteland and Black Lotus Metalworker plan significantly more attractive. So they tap the Underground Sea to play a Mystical Tutor for Ancestral Recall, which is a little annoying, but not the end of the world. So we'll see how this works. Unfortunately, the Metalworker itself gets met with a Force of Will. So now we're behind the 8 ball. Our opponent has Ancestral Recall coming up. As long as he has just 1 land, he can play Ancestral Recall and completely refill his hand again, and we've got nothing to do for 2 turns, and even on turn 2, just the Forge Master by itself, depending on what we draw, isn't really spectacular. So our opponent does have a land, and they play the Ancestral Recall. I thought that was a little interesting that they decided to play the Recall in their main phase. I guess the only advantage to that is to potentially play Moxen if you draw into them, but I don't know. I think that might be a little bit aggressive. I don't know. Again, I'm not 100% familiar with the format. Maybe that's the right play, but it seems a little aggressive in terms of the fact that I've got absolutely nothing here, and I'm not really doing anything. It seems like playing Ancestral now doesn't really have quite the value that it could have. So anyway, moving on. Our turn, the card we drew is a Sol Ring, which is nice, but it still doesn't let us play Forge Master this turn. So we have no choice but to play the Sol Ring, but we don't have the ability to do anything else with it. So we just pass a turn with the Sol Ring. Our opponent looks like they drew into Mox Pearl. They play another land, and then Demonic Tutor. At this point, I'm starting to get worried that perhaps we might be getting comboed out here. We saw the Time Vault in game 1, so it was a little concerning to see him Demonic Tutor. So having seen him Demonic Tutor last turn and drawing the Sundering Titan this turn, this was a pretty easy choice. We can hardcast Sundering Titan, so it seems like the logical plan at this point. Obviously, the only other alternative we had was to play Forge Master, which was not necessarily, doing much of anything to threaten our opponent. The Sundering Titan, I was hoping to catch him because he had tapped his Underground Sea. He's unable to play Mana Drain, which we saw. He exiled Mana Drain to the first Force of Will. The only card that he could have, other than maybe a Steel Sabotage or an Annul, was Force of Will. To prevent the Sundering Titan, we could have blown up 2 of his lands, which would have been pretty good at this point in this game to kind of turn things back around in our favor. But unfortunately, he had a Force Will. I don't know if that's actually the card that he got with Demonic Tutor. It'd be kind of strange to do that, because you search up a card that you have to then throw away another card just to counter one card of mine. It seems like it's bad, bad card advantage, but nonetheless, he had the Force and he stopped the Sundering Titan. So he ended up playing a land, and that was a tropical island that allowed him to play Oath of Druids. So at this point, it looks like I realized he's probably on the Tezzeret Oath deck, the one that won the Bazaar of Moxen last month. My plan is obviously changed at this point. So we are unable to really play any creatures. So our opponent then Vampiric Tutors. So far this game he's Mystical, Demonic, and Vampiric Tutored. So I would have assumed that he went and grabbed a Forbidden Orchard, but I don't think that deck actually plays Forbidden Orchard. And seeing that he doesn't end up playing that, he plays a Jace. It makes me, at this point, I know that he's playing that Tezzeret Oath deck, because otherwise he would have went and grabbed, the Forbidden Orchard in order to get Oath of Druids online. So he's not playing a straight Oath deck. He's definitely playing the Tezzerator deck with Oath in the sideboard. So our plan is quite stalled at this point. Obviously, we could have, tried to do something. But with our win conditions really being only being creatures, and Jace controlling the board with Oath, it really wasn't a great plan. So we drew Chalice of the Void. The one thing I was worried about was maybe a Hurkyl's Recall. So I just set Chalice of the Void at 2. So at this point, our opponent is getting a significant amount of card advantage. We're still unable to really do anything, but we do get the Staff of Domination, which is potentially something that we could do something with. It allows us to tap their Oath Up creature, which is kind of nice, and it allows us to then be able to play creatures, because it'll prevent their creature, their big whatever they end up playing, probably an Emrakul. It prevents them from being able to attack with it. But unfortunately, our opponent then plays Tezzeret. So now we're really behind the 8 ball, because he's going to go and search up a Time Vault, and he can win on the next turn. So we just draw a card off of Staff of Domination, trying to dig for something. We really don't have anything to do. We just play Metamorph. Our opponent ended up actually missing the trigger on Time Vault, I believe. Or did we get that far yet? No. Oh, no. Yeah, so our opponent ends up actually missing the trigger, or he untapped Time Vault, but he forgot to take the turn. So he got a Blight. So I was mostly interested at this point in just trying to figure out what creatures he was using. But he missed the turn. At this point, I actually F6'd, so it really didn't matter, but trying to be the gentleman here and to I just conceded the game. So we go to game 3. Alright, so our opening hand for game 3 is a little interesting. We've got the ability to fire off a Blind Revoker. Potentially, the thought process was to name Time Vault right off the bat, since that was obviously something that was a real plan so far in games 1 and 2 for him. We also have Crucible Worlds and Strip Mine lock, which is really nice. But unfortunately, we don't have any ability to play Crucible on turn 1. So the play is Ancient Tomb, Phyrexian Revoker, Name, and Time Vault, and then on turn 2 we can play either Academy or Strip Mine, and then play Crucible Worlds. So that is the line of play. Actually, forgive me, I decided to play Thorn of Amethyst first, which was met by a Force of Will. So next turn, I believe, is the Revoker plan. So our opponent led off with Tolarian Academy and Mox Pearl. So the original plan was to play Phyrexian Revoker and Tolarian Academy ourselves, potentially, or Tolarian Academy, or Strip Mine and Ancient Tomb and Crucible Worlds. But with his mana situation, it was much more advantageous for us to simply Strip Mine the Academy and then play Revoker, naming Mox Pearl. That effectively locks them out of any mana. We do have Phyrexian Metamorph, which can come in handy in a couple of turns, but for now, we want to just lock them out of mana. And it was a great play because they had 0 other lands. It's kind of a loose keep. They had the Force of Will, but knowing that a deck like ours plays 5 wasteland effects, I think keeping a 1 land hand with just one that's contingent, of course, also on Mox Pearl, to be even cast any mana. I mean, if we played Chalice of Void on 0, he would have been locked out of being able to play anything at all. But nonetheless, our plan of locking him out so far is looking pretty strong. So we draw a Mishra's Workshop, which is really good. And at this point, we can play the Tolarian Academy and Crucible Worlds and start strip mining him out of the game. So that's what we're going to do. Attack in with Revoker. Our opponent draws into a Mox Emerald, which is fine. What we're going to end up doing here is playing Tangle Wire. So this might have been about 1 or 2 turns too early on the Tangle Wire, but our opponent was so far behind, and we have the ability to Phyrexian Metamorph, naming Revoker, which could name Mox Emerald, as well as the Strip Mine that was available to us. It seemed like that was a much stronger line of play. Probably could have saved the Tangle Wire for 1 turn, but I don't believe that really comes back to haunt us in any meaningful way. So we're drawing some lands. Our opponent is also finally has a land. I guess the one good thing about Tangle Wire here is that it requires him to tap this land, which we can destroy with Strip Mine. I think that's kind of the only real advantage so far that we've had, because these cards are locked down with Revokers. So we play Mox Ruby. There's really no real reason to do any of this stuff, so we continue attacking for 4 with Revokers. We have this game pretty well locked up. We draw Black Lotus, which really doesn't mean anything at this point. Our opponent can get down an island in the Ancestrals, which is fine, except we still have the ability to kind of lock him out with Strip Mine and whatnot. So our opponent is kind of doing some last-ditched efforts to try and get something off of the top of the deck, playing into a Sensei's Top and whatnot, but it just wasn't enough, and we win round 2, and we're off to round 3.